right, this is the candidate forum for Lake Washington School District, School Board position number 5. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes for an opening statement, followed by questions from the audience and 2-minute responses for those. I also have some pre-submitted questions that we will be asking. I hope to spend most of our evening answering questions from the audience. However, I do have a few that were emailed to me. Candidates have been emailed a list of topics that may be covered this evening, but you could surprise me. And moderator questions will be based on these topics. Please take a moment to silence your electronics so there are fewer distractions for our candidates. Tonight's forum is being recorded and will be posted on social media, including our website and our Facebook page. In addition, the Red Room reporter will be live streaming the forum and may be sharing questions from their live audience. Recordings are the property of Education Hill Neighborhood Association, and if you do use them or pass them on, I just hope that you would give us credit for any of that recording that goes on. Candidates, again, thank you so much for coming this evening. I know everybody has a busy schedule, a busy life. To keep our evening flowing smoothly, please pay attention to our timer. Nice, great, big numbers for you. And there will be a sound when your time is coming down to a close. I'd like to introduce our candidates for the school board position number 5, Siri Bleasner. Everybody can wave. There you go. And Susan Wilkins. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and start with your opening statements. And we're going to start with Siri. You have 3 minutes.
Look, he's already going. All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for being an active participant in our democratic process, because as you know, elections do shape the future of our schools, our community, and our country. And thank you so much, Paige, for this opportunity to connect with community members, and for Madison Miller from the reporters for setting up the possibility to live stream. So to begin with, I'm Siri Bleasner, and I am running for re-election for the Lake Washington School Board. I have had the honor and the privilege to serve as your school board director for the last 8 years, and currently as board president. I chose to run the first time in 2011, and I'm now seeking re-election because I do believe that an excellent public education is the foundation of our democracy, and that elected school boards, through policy decisions and active community engagement, play a key role in ensuring that each and every student graduates ready for the future of their choice. So over the last 8 years as a school board director, I have worked to ensure that Lake Washington continues to deliver an excellent education that reflects the priorities of our community while targeting key strategic areas that impact student success. These areas include implementing programs to address achievement and opportunity gaps. Lake Washington's on-time graduation rate has steadily increased and is now at 93.6%. And perhaps what is most exciting is we've improved outcomes for all our students, regardless of their background or income. We've increased our community engagement. We've established multiple community task forces and committees to ensure that community, families, and students are part of decisions that impact public schools. From curriculum adoption to school start times to budgeting and long-term facility planning, students, parents, and the community have a stronger voice in our district. We've enhanced our school environments. We've provided additional supports for students through a focus on social and emotional learning and the addition of social workers to address mental health and behavioral health challenges. We have also added much-needed classroom space throughout our district. We've developed stronger partnerships with cities and other elected officials to address common challenges and complex issues. These relationships will help to ensure an environment that supports strong schools and allow for creative solutions. I'm proud of our collaborative work that I've been part of these past 8 years, and I look forward to building on these. And I'm committed to supporting strategic efforts and policies that deliver excellent outcomes and equitable opportunities for each and every student to reach their potential, inclusive and welcome learning environments for every student to thrive, and strong and effective partnership and outreach efforts to engage students, families, businesses, and community in public education. The African proverb, to go fast, go alone. To go far, go together, is very applicable to public education. I am seeking re-election to continue building a world-class school district and to effectively address those issues that limit success for students. Thank you.
Okay. I'm Susan Wilkins, and I'm running for school board position number 5. I've lived on Education Hill for nearly 22 years and had 4 children who went through the school district. Originally, I proposed 3 goals to accomplish if I were elected to the school board. One would be to enrich the math education for the elementary students, address the later start times for high school students, and then to improve the outcomes for the special education students. In addition, I realize that there are 2 more issues that I feel are very pressing. The first is the McCleary plan that was passed by the legislature in 2017 that, first of all, increased everybody's property taxes, but also sent a lot of money back into the Lake Washington School District. We have heard so little about where that money is going to go, how it can be spent, what the limitations are on it, and I believe that it's the school board's responsibility to start looking into that. I am likely to do a lot of my own research and bring it to the board, including talking to people at the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, the OSPI, talking to the educational service districts who also are involved in the use of the money, so that we can get a better outcome for all of our students and have the money distributed correctly and legally. Additionally, I believe it's the board's responsibility to ensure that all of our employees are compensated adequately and fairly. And I'm talking about especially the office secretaries who are currently negotiating with the school district for raises. In examining the pay scales in the district, it appears that office workers, as well as other subordinate job categories, including instructional assistants and paraeducators, are unevenly compensated based on historical gender inequalities. I'll work with the board and the superintendent and study the issues and bring about positive change if I'm elected. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our first question. How does the board work with the superintendent, district, and staff? And we're going to go ahead and start with Susan.
The school board is like a board of directors of a corporation because the school district is actually considered to be a corporation. So the board hires the superintendent who acts as the CEO, like in any large corporation. The board makes recommendations to the superintendent for how she or he should run the district. And then the superintendent interfaces with all of the employees in the district. As a board member, I couldn't go to any employee and tell them to do anything. That's not how it works, in the same way that a board for a large corporation couldn't deal with employees. But what a board of directors can do is they can get together and make a resolution that they pass at a meeting that is then tells the superintendent, we believe you must do this. And quite honestly, I've never heard the Lake Washington School Board ever propose a resolution to tell the superintendent what she needed to do. From that point of view, I would build a consensus and direct the superintendent to make changes that I believed were necessary. That's the way the school board's supposed to work.
Thank you. Siri?
So thank you. So the Lake Washington School District, every board has a governance policy and framework in which you work under and how you function. So in the Lake Washington School Board, we work under a policy governance model. So the board's role is to establish the outcomes and results expected by the organization, by the school district. So we have very clear student results set forward. We expect our mission and vision that every student will graduate future ready. We expect specific hitting standards across various different disciplines, and we have well-being goals for the district. Those are the piece of the outcomes that are set forward. from the board's perspective. With that comes operational expectations, the values in which the organization is meant to operate. So the board sets very clear policy around treatment of staff, engagement with communities, the way the superintendent is to operate the organization. And that sort of sets the framework in which for the superintendent, who is then hired and delegated the administrative responsibilities to run the school district. So they do have the authority within the parameters given by the school board. And so the board and the superintendent work in a lot of partnership and being able, because that is a very team activity. We help to make sure that the community linkage to the community is happening and that voice is brought forward and that those expectations and policies are set forward. And the superintendent's responsibility is to carry that out. The next responsibility from the board is the accountability and the monitoring of how effectively are those policies being implemented. So every year we actually review monitoring reports that go through those outcomes, those different measures to confirm, are we meeting the goals of what we've said? In regards to the individual schools, Susan's absolutely right. We do not intervene into that area. The board's role is really through the superintendent, and our connection is with community and bringing that value in.
Thank you. All right, our next question. How can the board support and retain educational support professionals and paraeducators? And we're going to start with Sari.
So just very quickly, so to just make clear, we are currently in negotiation with the educational support professionals, and so that is a component of what's happening. So with that, what I will say, when it comes to retaining our employees, we do have a policy, very clear operational expectations that are set forward, that you ensure competitive pay, benefits, and that in regards to finances and budget that's available, and in regards to neighboring districts within the policies in which provided. At the same time, we have to ensure that we're providing training and professional development for those individuals, so that any individual who comes on, we make sure they have any adequate training that they need in which to do their job effectively. The other piece that's highly important is making sure that people feel valued within the organization. And so working with that and making sure they have a voice in what's happening and being able to speak to what's going on and have the opportunity to do so. So those are the components in which to do so. The other piece that's interesting in regards to paraeducators and some of these positions, the way in which those are set up are very part-time or part-year positions. And so those can be difficult things to retain people in positions like that. So we need to start thinking about possible strategies of how do you extend those possibilities for individuals who want full-time work or full-year work and provide that possibility in which to do so. Right now you might end up on a split schedule, you work a school year. There are people who that's the flexibility they want. For my daughter, it works beautifully. She's a paraeducator in the Bellevue School District, and she finds that flexibility in her schedule to be great because it gives her the summers off to go work with the horses. However, that's not true for everybody who's working in those positions. So how do we get more creative in our abilities to be able to, but this is all through negotiations with various unions and collective bargaining, so it has to be done in a very collaborative approach and working with those individuals.
Could you repeat the question?
How can the board support and retain educational support professionals and paraeducators?
The OSPI publishes a database of salaries for each school district, and in the Lake Washington School District, it's Form S-275. So I looked it up and used the database to pull out all the positions that we're talking about. The paraeducators and the instructional aides are lumped together, and the office clerical are all lumped together. There are 614 instructional aides and paraeducators and 265 office clerical. What's really striking is when you look at it, they are all part-time salaried employees who don't make nearly as much as their peers. And that's been going on for a long time. We need to pay them more. We don't want to go and look at Bellevue and say, well, Bellevue doesn't pay them very much, so we don't need to pay them very much. We need to go and look at let's say King County or City of Redmond, and say how much does an administrative assistant make there, and pay competitively. How much does a full-time teacher make who's able to receive benefits and full-time salary year-round? Until we're competitive with other positions, not only in the district or in competing districts, we are going to have a high turnover of employees. And for paraeducators who seem to come and go rapidly, for instructional aides who are constantly coming and going, it really hurts our students. So until we take a hard look and decide that we're going to be competitive, our students are going to suffer. And I strongly encourage and support competitive wages for our aides and clerical staff. Thank you.
Any questions from the audience?
How do you deal with a growing population of students here in Lake Washington School District?
How do we deal with a growing population of students in the school district? And can we be more specific? Housing of students, education?
Some of these schools, we've seen tremendous growth in our district because we have a lot more people moving here. People are expecting that there'll be schools available for them.
Okay. One thing that we need to stop doing is tearing down schools. We need to focus on new construction that creates space for all the incoming students. We should not tear down another school until we have room for all of our students who are in portables. We should also have a better way of predicting how many students will be coming in. Right now, we use a very simplistic model that just says, oh, here comes an apartment, here comes a house, we're expecting a few students here and there. And the reality is sometimes these, well, long-term, these apartments and houses always end up creating more students than we expected. Additionally, when people age out, sell their house, and new people come in, we're not really accounting for the growth that goes there. So a better model of predicting how many students we'll have will allow us to build more capacity sooner. From what I understand, we're expecting 1,100 students this year when we only predicted that we'd be getting 300 more. Right there, we have to ask what's wrong with our model and how can we fix it? So additional construction that creates space and a better model that predicts where and when the students will arrive are absolutely essential for us to handle the new capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Sari?
So thank you for the question. This growth issue has been going on for quite a period of time. So starting in about 2008, we saw an incredible growth start to happen within the district. And we gained about 6,000 students in a period of 6 years in that time frame. And we are expecting probably another 2,000 to 3,000 coming in that point in time. So when we speak about projections, we currently have a student population of 30,000 students. So when you are projecting, your goal is to be able to say how many is that. So when you are difference by 500 students, that is less than 2%. So it is a process of doing so. So in the projection process, we look at trying to see how does that work and going forward. So in doing so, we know these students are coming, the growth is seen. We had the long-term facilities task force that helped to provide some very clear guidance and phases of how we were going to go forward to address these things. So it's important to be able to address not only the new growth coming in and the new students, but there are multiple of other pieces at play here. The state legislature has done reduced class size, so that's putting an impact upon our buildings. We also have an impact upon our buildings due to all-day kindergarten coming in. There were actually 70 classrooms that we needed in order to house all-day kindergarten. So we have multiple pressures upon our district in doing this. So there's a combination of things. We need to look at building new buildings. We also have about 5 schools that are still in aging condition that need to be considered for remodel and expansion considered to what we do. So I would actually disagree that we want to stop doing that completely. We have been able to remodel Juanita High School and added 500 seats, and that will greatly serve that community out there. Land is very expensive. And so we're going to have to be clever and thoughtful and think out of the box of how do we utilize our current land. Kamiakin sits on a fairly large piece of land. Is there ways we can build differently on that in order to go forward? So there's a variety of components that we need to look at and able to do this.
Thank you. Another audience question?
Hello, and thank you for coming out tonight. What changes do you have in mind for the curriculum and operations and also the intake and selection process for the gifted program?
We're going to start with Siri on this one.
Could you repeat that just one more time? I'm sure I caught the first half of your question. I'm sorry.
Well, the first part was thanking you for being here tonight, and the rest was a two-part question about the gifted program. What changes do you have in mind for the curriculum and the operations? And what changes do you have in mind for intake and selection?
Thank you. Okay, so the Highly Capable program has multiple different programs and how we do so. So we have a full-time program that students qualify in through, and they are in a, they go to a different, they actually are now in their neighborhood schools, but they go to those schools and they get the gifted program there. We also have a pull-out program where you're given 1 day a week in enrichment opportunities, and now we also have a push-in program, K-5, where we actually have teachers go to the schools, gifted teachers hired for gifted education, and they work with the students for a half hour a week, if I remember right, pulling kids out and going into those classrooms. So we're trying to expand those opportunities for that curriculum and being able to have it be within their schools as well and have the opportunity for more students. So that was a piece of expanding the options available. That's at the elementary level. With that as well, that's important that you have enhancement in that gifted curriculum around problem-based learning, opportunities to explore and do those pieces. So they have been expanding the full-time curriculum to do some of that. It has an advanced curriculum. At the same time, they're trying to expand the hands-on and really more of the critical thinking in those components going forward. As for the screening, if we were to look at our gifted program, and I'll be clear, we've looked at these numbers, if you disaggregate that and you look at the differences and based on is it representative of the student population that we have and what we would expect, I would say no, it's not currently. And so some of that's the screening procedures, and we worked at trying to change some of those. We do a universal screen in order to, in first grade to be able to identify those who are gifted at that point. At the same time, then, what we need to be doing is really looking at how do we ensure that that screening process is adequately capturing all our students who have potential to be gifted and should qualify for these services. Because at this point, we're still not serving a low-income population to the extent I would expect.
Thank you. Susan?
The question about intake and selection for the gifted program is a really old question because my oldest son was in the gifted program way back in 2002, and we struggled to get him into that, and there weren't enough spaces. We have a huge, very bright population who want their children to be in gifted programs, and the students really do deserve to be in the program. And we offer very few seats. Now, if a student sits in a seat in a regular classroom or in a gifted classroom, it's the same space being taken up. The real problem we have is that we don't have a director of facilities planning in this school district. When I was on the long-term facilities planning task force, I recognized that nobody was really competent at planning. It was all being done by Janine Fogard and Barbara Postumus, both who have business degrees and absolutely no experience in facilities planning. So the first thing that I would do is say, let's hire a facilities planner who actually knows how to figure out where the space is, who will take a space audit, because they adamantly refused to figure out how the space in the district was being used. So if we hire a facilities director who's able to use our space competently, we'll be able to have space for many students who want to be in the gifted program and deserve to be in the gifted program. And that's the short answer. We need better management of our facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I have 2 follow-up questions. Both were submitted, so they are a little repetitive, but they kind of come at the question in a different way. The first one is, how can the board support students and staff as enrollment grows? We talked about the building as enrollment grows, but not how we support students and staff. And we're going to go ahead and start with Susan on this one.
This goes back to the idea of, are we utilizing our space correctly? When I was on the long-term facilities planning task force, we went through many schools where we saw that space was being wasted. At Keller Elementary, I believe, we saw a whole room next to the library that they didn't know what to do with, so they just left it empty. In a lot of schools, they have these big common rooms that are shared learning spaces that go unused. Using that, it's kind of a surplus space, but it's also a little bit hard to use, would allow us to have small learning spaces for tutoring where the paraeducators could take students who needed extra help and then return them to the classroom, where small classrooms could be set up so that we could have multiple learning environments going on at the same time. When you add so many more students, you have so many more different needs. And we actually know that the space isn't being utilized correctly. So as we grow, if we use the space better, we will be able to accommodate a variety of learning classrooms and needs.
Thank you. Sari?
So as the enrollment grows and that pressure on the schools does happen, and that does impact our students and staff just because the physicality of the space. I had the opportunity to be at Rockwell and to tour there a year ago, and the amount of items that were in the hallways that they were trying to work around, and that component, because they were at about 600 plus students, and trying to address that capacity challenge within that setting was very difficult. And so in doing so when we opened the new school, so when Clara Barton opened, it actually drew off a lot of those students. And now Rockwell is down to a size. I remember speaking with the principal, and he said it's so much better because now all my classes are inside the school. I only have the extra classes out in the portables, our extended kid day and everything. So it was a much better environment. So that seems to help. So there is help by even building. We do help support those schools and other places that have that overcrowding. When we speak about, I've also had the tour to tour our new schools, so Clara Barton, Ella Baker, and that extra instructional space, there are a lot of demands placed upon these things, and so we are working very hard that extra space is how we ensure our students are educated well in this day and age. Problem-based learning, critical thinking, teamwork, collaboration, this requires the opportunity to group kids in different ways and to bring them together in different environments. And so having that space allows you to do those. So as we are growing and that piece, I think we have to continue to think about how do we keep our schools small still at this point in time. So how do you still build relations between those students and staff to be able to feel that way? How do you make sure a student is still known as that enrollment grows and we're having to take care of that? So those are all those pieces. Facilities are such a pressing need in this piece, and we know that this limits things we can do. Our staff is incredible at working to make it not be such an issue, but it does come through as our growth does continue.
Thank you. We're going to return to questions about the QUEST program, and this is submitted by one of our association members. The QUEST program has been at numerous locations over the last few years. How does the board project need and plan for this and other programs in the district? Sari?
So the policies in the past, there's been a variety of different things. So as we were growing and doing this, we were looking at how do you create space in different places for neighborhood kids that were coming in. And so a QUEST program might be moved to a different school because they had space there, and so that they would be moved. When we were building Ella Baker and Clara Barton, there was a whole reboundary that took place in the Redmond learning community. And as part of that reboundary, it was thought about how do we get QUEST back into those neighborhood schools? If we have enough students in which to support classrooms in their neighborhood school. Why are we sending them to another school? So as they redid that reboundary process, we actually were able to place a Quest program in every, all but Rockwell and Mann, they didn't have the space at the time, into those elementary schools so that the students went back to their neighborhood elementary schools. We also have it in all of our middle schools as well. So Timberline opened with it, Evergreen, and Redmond Middle. So we did go to the whole concept of that is an impact on those kids, moving them. Special education programs was the same piece. So now as we are building our new schools, we're actually putting forward that we are thinking about those rooms, that you make sure that you have defined spaces in which to be able to address resource rooms, sensory issues, those OT, PT, occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech language pathologists, any of those extra services that are required or for those small learning groups. So we're aware of that challenge of moving around, and as we are able to build and start to address some of the growth and facility challenges and look for other ways, these are the ways that we're then able to keep those in our neighborhood schools. As we work with special education to move towards more inclusion within neighborhood schools, that's another piece. Facilities are going to have more need, and so we're going to need to have that capacity in order to be able to bring people into their neighborhood schools.
Thank you. Susan?
When my middle child was in Quest at Einstein, they suddenly told us, okay, you're going to go to Redmond Elementary, and we had to ask, why are we moving? And it really came down to who would we even talk to about this strange change, because students have to be in school here or there or wherever. What it comes down to, as I keep saying, is we don't have really competent facilities planning at the main office. We don't plan it out very well. We don't know where students are. We can't ask the question of a simple question such as how many classrooms are available at each school for science, like at a, boy, I'm stumbling on this. We don't know what facilities we have where. So basically we need to hire a facilities director. And until we do that, we are going to continue to have the problem of not knowing where the space is and when it's available and where it's available. As a school board member, I would direct the superintendent to hire a director of facilities planning who has significant experience in the same way that the major corporations in Seattle have facilities planners. We need to know how we're using our space, and we need to use it wisely.
Thank you. Audience questions?
Can you tell me what community partnerships would you like to see developed or expanded in the next 4 years, and what the benefit to the students would be of those community partnerships?
I get that question?
Yes, Susan.
I would want to see community partnerships at the upper grade levels where students are working on internships and more vocational training in the community or with the corporations, so that they would have a better understanding of what they wanted to do and figure out a way with the permission from the OSPI for giving them credit for actually going out and doing these work-study class work environments. That's a tough one, but I do feel that a lot of students don't have the resources to go to a expensive college and oftentimes go to college and then discover that they're not doing what they want to do. WANIC is a wonderful example, but we need to expand it. We need to broaden the choices that students can do. Lake Tech is a very good example. Running Start allows students to accumulate college credits, but we need to do more so that it's more integrated into a job once they leave high school or community college or regular college.
Thank you. Sari.
Community partnerships are sort of a key component in really ensuring the enhancement and enrichment and the opportunities for all our students to be able to go forward. So I would support and continue, we actually are doing a lot of this, is continue to support a lot of partnerships with our businesses in which to be able to address some of those internships, externships, and bring that in, make the learning become real in an applied learning situation. Doing dual credit and the opportunity for those components, so being able to work with our vocational colleges, DigiPen, Wanik, Lake Washington Tech, Cascadia College, UW-Bothell. There's a lot of career college pathing that you can do in which to build those in, and bringing in our community partners, such as we have Evergreen Health, who works up at Eastlake with a group up there in Project Lead the Way doing project design, and being able to bring those community partners into our schools as well as our students outside of the schools. The other big component is for those opportunities after school. We do a lot of extra support with the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA. They actually provide a lot of before and after school care in which we do, which are key things for our communities that support sort of the whole child and the whole family in doing so. The other community partnerships is with our city organizations and being able to do that. There's a lot of civic thought and how are we engaged in our communities, and our partnering and bringing in actions with our cities will help to build those components as well with our students. There is junior achievement is one that we're actually working on now to do a business day so we can bring in financial literacy and those components to help build those life skill pieces that students need going forward. So the way that we just enrich our core curriculum and our opportunities, then you think about supporting our students from a whole child. We have the Links and Lunch Buddies. Those are community partnerships to find volunteers who come in and support our students. Maybe they have lunch with them and play games, and so that's a connection that they have in relationships. These are all those community partnerships that are vital for our students to succeed.
Another audience question?
Community relations is a large part of a director's position. Explain how you plan to engage the community to enhance your work and facilitate the work of the board.
Siri?
So as a board member, one of the key roles that you do play is as an ambassador into the community in regards to public education and the things that are going on. And so those community relations are vitally important. So I guess the steps I have taken and will continue to take, there are those things I do within the district specifically and being able to go. So being engaged with our local schools, being able to go tour, see what's happening, see how those programs and things we've implemented are going on, speak to staff to know what's happening in those environments so I can better think about policies and things at the level of the board. At the same time, you then have the opportunity to talk to students. So having the opportunity to do focus groups with students, find out what is your experience like. I would love to have students come back after 2 years and say, did we succeed? How was life? How did your school education help, and how did that get going forward? On top of that, so that's within the school, you then have within the community. I think it's important that you sit on other committees within our cities. So I've sat on the Salary Commission for the City of Redmond, the Budgeting by Priorities, as well as the Community Center Stakeholders Group and the City of Redmond, because that can help to ensure that the school's needs and our students are there, and I get to learn what's happening within the city and build those relations, and that helps to address things as they come bigger, as we need to partner and collaborate on bigger issues going forward. At the same time, there's other nonprofit organizations to be involved with. Eastside Pathways is a cradle to career, and that can help to pull those things in. Attending PTA meetings, the special needs group that we have here, the Gifted Education Advisory Committee, all those things are valuable for board members to pull in. I also believe in going out, and I sit on the Washington State School Directors Association as the school board representative for King County, and that gives me the opportunity to meet other school directors from around the state to learn issues there and to bring those things back to our district as well. So those would be all the components.
Susan?
As far as community relations go, I, in the past, have gone to the school board during their comment period and addressed the board and heard nothing back. So one of the first things I would do would be to change the policy that when a person appears before the board and makes comments, that their comments are acknowledged and responded to, even if it's Simply, we heard you and we are working on it. I believe that the community stops going to talk to the board once they realize that nothing is going to happen. I've sent email to the board and not even received an acknowledgement that I sent it to the right address. If we're going to engage with the community and really relate to them, we have to respond. I know that the city of Redmond has their city council members will have the ombudsman of the month who answers the questions. I would like to see that implemented where people are actually acknowledged and responded to. The other thing is, because it is a board-CEO relationship, if it is important, I'd like to see the board make a resolution that the superintendent needs to address the issue if it really comes to that. I've never heard any comment from a community member directed towards the superintendent to address. It's always been, okay, thank you for coming, we don't talk to you, and that's it, goodbye. So I'd like to have better communication, actual communication between the community and the board and the CEO in order to get adequate or positive results. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The question is, how can the board help teachers and staff overcome affordability issues in the district? And we'll start with Susan on this one.
Affordability issues really come down to pay scale, and we can pay teachers only what is approved by the legislature. The minimum salary for teachers is $64,000, or the starting salary is supposed to be $64,000 adjusted for the region that you live in. The maximum is $90,000 with 10% bonus depending on whether or not you can you have special circumstances such as where you live or technical skills. However, we recently heard that the Seattle School District will be paying its top teachers $125,000. So I'm not sure how that's all going to, I'm not sure where their money came from, and that's a big question. Affordability is an issue that everybody's dealing with, and the school board really has almost no authority to fix the problem. It comes down to transportation issues, overcrowding, high salaries of tech workers. I don't have a solution for this one. Thank you.
Siri?
So affordability is a conversation you hear talked about a lot, and not only here, but I've heard it when I've been to the city council forum as well as the mayors, and looking at that, the cost of living has been on the rise. And how you compensate is definitely a component, and there is a whole wide range around that. But when we speak to housing affordability, this is a challenging issue in our community with the rapid rise of housing prices. And there's been much discussion you hear about workplace housing or middle-income housing. And to support that type of housing, and even as a board perspective, you'd have to require partnering with our local jurisdictions and our businesses, organizations, local cities, and working with our legislators to research and develop what potential strategies could be. If you look nationwide or around the area, and actually even in the city of Kirkland, they're pursuing some options of possible getting involved with housing affordability. There are different things that have been out there. You can offer a housing allowance as a strategy to address housing affordability. You can do a down payment and mortgage support on a home through a loan program or equity sharing. There's affordable housing specific to school teachers in some cities right now, and staff working with other jurisdictions such as in that piece. So you have school districts have become landlords, honestly, to help deal with some of the housing crisis in different cities. So these are all different options of what you can do. There's an option actually of private-public partnership. You put housing on top of schools. They've done it with fire stations and building low-income senior housing above fire stations, of ways to do it. So these are all the different options that are out there. In order to even start to consider that, this is involve a collaborative process with multiple people at the table to see what's even feasible within our community and within our context. And do we have a community and staff who would want this provided to them. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in order to address it. I think there are ways we can look at it, and this was actually one of the top things we talked about when we convened the cities together of how to work together on this issue more effectively.
Thank you. This is a submitted question. Is the board working on implementing later school start times for middle and especially high school students? Siri?
So school start times have been part of a task force or committee for the last 3 years. So it was part of a college and career ready task force where they were looking not only at school start times but also at the 7-day period, or trying to look at expanding options at our high school. So in that process, they went through, they studied a multitude of things, looked at how you would shift things and that component, and came through with that recommendation a year ago that we would implement the 7-day period. We wouldn't be changing the high school start time at that time, as we were adding 20 minutes and trying to adjust a complex system at that point for two things wasn't going to quite work. So they were going to do one more year to study what happened with that change, because you had to move elementary schools to later. The middle schools actually are starting later than they used to. They're about 20 minutes later from when they were. So in this last year, there was another task force that was made up of parents, teachers, staff, administrators that looked specifically at what was the outcome of changing our school start time schedules. The recommendations that they came back with after having looked at parent surveys, teacher surveys, staff survey, along with focus groups with our students, because we have 2 high schools that start at 8 o'clock and 2 that start at 7:30. So they did focus groups with students, a wide range of them, to try to figure out what are the students' experiences around this. And so what the recommendations came back was high school should start no earlier than 8 o'clock, and elementary should ideally not start later than 9 o'clock. So ideally, the sweet start is between 8 and 9. So right now, we're in the process. The superintendent is going back, looking at that. What are the possibilities? Transportation is always one of the big complex pieces in there. If you look at school districts around the area, Bellevue's at 8 o'clock. They're on Metro. Issaquah's 8 o'clock for their high schools. And North Shore is actually 7:30. So it's the complexity of that transportation system is the piece. There's one component that we're working at trying to do more of is getting our high school students onto Metro and public transportation and making that more of an access. If we could get our high school students to be able to access transportation on their own, we could free up some yellow buses that would then possibly allow the capacity to shift those start times. There isn't the idea to flip elementary earlier, because if you actually look at the data and the feedback we've gotten from parents and this task force, they specifically came back and said that's not really the good option. There's lots of different varying opinions out there. So yeah, they're still being looked at. I would support the recommendations as came forward that no later than 8. Thank you. Sorry for going over time.
I gave you a little extra time because it is a very complex question and a very
I could go on
complex
much
answer.
longer
So,
about it. But
Susan, you'll have 3 minutes on that one.
Do you want, the question is, what's the administration doing? And I'm not privy to the planning of that, so.
Well, I think the actual question was, how the studies have been done on later school start times. And the district has spoken about having later school start times, and the writer of the question was wondering when that was going to start taking effect, what kind of studies had been done within the district, and all of that kind of thing.
Okay. I did look at the data on the focus groups, and I found that there were not really that many parents who responded to it. It's to have, 200 people determine how 30,000 students are affected isn't really a good focus group, and it doesn't really address the needs of the whole group. One thing that really should be looked at is we don't have to change the whole district all at once. All 30,000 students don't need to be changed. We could do it within the learning communities. So it's possible that Redmond could be the first learning community that does the change. As opposed, or Sammamish is the first learning community, and their buses tend to be circulated among just that group of residents. So whether the elementary bus goes first or last, and the high school bus goes first or last, it doesn't matter, but because you're just changing the order. The other thing that needs to be looked at is high school. Everybody doesn't need to start at the same time, because with the potential 28 credits available, a lot of students could actually start later. They would need to provide their own transportation because they don't need the full 28 credits. They just need the 24 to graduate. So there's a lot of variability. If it's already underway, that's great, but I actually have some really good ideas on how to make it work more effectively and how to implement it, and I would like to be involved in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Audience questions?
Can I expand on that for just a second,
Sure,
since there's not a question?
sure. No, give her a couple, and
Don't give
if
me
Susan
five.
and if Susan wants to respond, she can as well.
It was actually part of the conversation what
That
Susan was saying. I just wanted to
yeah.
build on that because I think that was a very good point to bring forward. Was we still are thinking about school start times from an old mindset that it sets from a time to that. So thinking about that flexible scheduling, is there the capacity that you could start at 10 o'clock and not finish till later, or as we do these different things. So those are the different things that still need to be discussed and figured out, because there's a lot of, again, the complexity around that brings a lot of players into that system. So that's the exciting piece. That's the piece that metro and public transportation, that's another component that could help put some of these school start times into a different piece. So I do think that creativity and thinking that differently and being able to pull that is a vital, important step going forward. And sometimes we get stuck in these little ruts. And so thank you for reminding me of that and being able to push that piece forward and being able to think that way. Running Start does, this is one that you watch the kids in Running Start being able to have very different schedules at the high school, and that works very well in different ways. So how can we maybe build that in better into our schools would be a very valuable thing to start thinking about and going forward.
Susan, if you have anything else to say, go ahead.
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So while we're on the subject of Running Start, unless anybody has any audience questions, okay? I'm going to bring in WANIC, Running Start, the Lake Washington Tech. My experience was when my son was interested in those, they did not play well with pre-planning. So for instance, they had to sign up for their classes in February, but WANIC didn't post any of their schedules until August. So it was difficult to plan football, the job, band, the classes that he wanted to take at Redmond High School in this instance, versus the classes that he wanted to take at WANIC or Lake Washington. How much input does the district have and the school board have in working with those facilities, Bellevue College, WANIC, Lake Washington, in providing those types of programs for our high school students? And we'll go ahead and start with Susan on that one.
Well, I have 4 children, ages 19 through 26, and we took advantage of WANIC and Running Start and Lake Tech extensively. And I have to say it was not easy, and we had to do so much of the research on our own. The school district, well, Tracy Pierce, who was the previous superintendent, created a position for herself to be director of the high school expanded programs, and she recently left to go to the Kennewick School District, and they replaced her with a director from, I believe, Bellingham. And I hope that that director is better at publicizing the different programs that students can take and how to find them, because I looked last year to see how easy they were, and there wasn't enough information. It's something that the Lake Washington School District has failed miserably at, in helping students who need alternate programs and who want alternate programs. find them. So we need to give the new director a chance to figure out how to implement and publicize the programs before I can say things need to get better. But it does need to get a lot better so that students can find these opportunities that are absolutely essential for their futures. And I know that we struggled terribly to find what our kids needed, and we did a lot of research and legwork and investigation.
Thank you. Siri?
So I think the concern of how well do we make sure that students are aware of all the opportunities and create the accessibility to these opportunities, because there's transportation involved with it, schedules within things. I know when my daughter was looking at trying to do American Sign Language, it was offered through Wannock, but at Issaquah High School, she would have had to travel there, would have taken out 2 periods out of her high school. There was no way she could do it. So that wasn't really an option. So this is something that's been talked about, and so definitely in the area of the college and career readiness and putting forward those college career pathways, this is a piece that the new director, Donata, is working on at trying to make sure that we're able to communicate these things better and that these are clear aligned pathways, and how do our school schedules work with that. That was part of the shifting in the way that we're actually structured organizationally. This was one of the moves the superintendent made when she came in. That we have a leveled look now, so we have people who are supporting across all our secondary schools so that they can look at how all those schedules working, how is dual credit working, how is access to those, how do we improve that. So the board's talked about wanting to really, as we've looked at those dual credit options and enrollment in Wannock or Running Start, and looked at it by school, saying, well, why is it better here and not there? How are you addressing things here? What are ways you can make it better? So those are the roles the board has played. What we're speaking to here is really an administrative, and the challenge of knowing the complexity within the system, that's a piece that even in our community engagement forums for the strategic plan work that was done, that came out from our community members. That there's more work to be done to communicate more effectively, especially with this changing environment and all these options available to you, that we need to do a better job as a district to communicate those things and have stronger roles with our counselors being able to communicate those things. So that's actually a piece of the strategic plan to work better in that component. And so that's something to definitely bring up. We have Let's Talk on the Lake Washington School District website that you can put that in, and then somebody can help respond to it too.
Thank you. All right. Audience question.
As our schools become more diverse, language and background, how can our schools better address all those needs?
That's mine.
Siri, that's yours.
So it's exciting, the diversity and the difference. If you're not aware, today, from the 13th through the 22nd of this month is Welcoming Week. So there are lots of activities happening out there in order to be able to meet our neighbors who are from different places, as well as to make those connections across the board. So I encourage everybody to do that. So that's one thing I believe we can do, is to make sure we get out and have opportunities to meet and understand and greet people in different settings. So on the other piece is, how do you work within ensuring quality and excellent education for multiple languages, students who come in with multiple different backgrounds, different characteristics. So we have different ways in which we do that. So we actually now have a director of equity, opportunity, and inclusion, and she is working very hard at helping to create that environment and a plan on how you work with our staff and families and students to engage them, because a lot of our families who've come from other countries, it's a different school system. And if you've ever lived overseas, I remember my daughter was enrolling in Bolivia to her kindergarten, and they insisted she had a second last name. And I said, no, she doesn't. Her name is only Init Klein. They said, no, she must have one. And I was like, no, she doesn't. And so I had to just give her one, because that was how their school system worked, and they couldn't enroll her unless she had 2 last names. So I did that. So we have the same sorts of things here when people come in. The things that seem really simple aren't necessarily, because your system's different, your culture's different, so we have to do a better job that way in bringing that forward. We also have to create understanding across the board of people from different backgrounds and ensure that that's available. We need to make sure our communications we have translation capacity, that we have people who can do direct face-to-face conversations with people to help bring them in and do that. Our PTAs are fabulous in the work that they do to make sure that that diversity is taken care of as well.
Thank you. Susan?
That beep throws me off. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I grew up in Ohio with family members who all spoke English as a second language. My grandmother spoke Romanian, my grandfather spoke Spanish. I went to a church where people were arriving from Romania continuously, and I watched them learn English easily, especially if they were under 10. So one of the biggest problems that parents had was that their children were losing the ability to speak to them in their native language. The only thing that I would really make sure of as a policy decision would be that when students come in who speak a foreign language, that they are not assigned to a teacher who doesn't speak English as their first language. That was one of the problems that I encountered with my kids' classmates, was that they had teachers who spoke different languages and couldn't correct the very fine areas of the English language, whether you use I have done this, I had done this, the strange past participles, the conditional sentences, or the conditional tenses. When students get into the upper grades, if they're above 10, we need to do a much better job of helping them to acclimate to English. Culturally, that's a different issue. What we're really talking about is learning to speak English so that they can function properly in school and in the community as they get older. Culturally, it's a challenge. We have so many different people moving here from so many different places that it's hard for us to keep track. So cultural sensitivity is one of the most important things, and I think people are aware, but we always have to stay on our toes on that.
Thank you. Any audience questions?
What if I have one more thing I'd like to add?
Sure.
The other component with the diversity is, and I'm not sure if people are aware, we have started a dual language immersion program at Einstein Elementary. That's in Spanish. And so that's an opportunity that students who are native Spanish speakers as well as native English speakers, they are learning both languages at the same time and literacy within it. The value behind that and being able to really address diversity in different things is they now have a teacher who speaks Spanish as well as one who speaks English. So you are then able to engage families better within that setting and be able to expand those things out. So that's another way in which to do so, is to bring that language and that culture in and make it part of our communities and what we do and celebrate those things within that environment. So that's sort of one of those exciting things that's just been the last 2 years it was implemented, and how we're going to be expanding it through. So that's a key component. Culturally responsive teaching is probably the other component that's talked a lot about, and that's just making sure our teachers are prepared and understand how to work with individuals from different cultures, how you ask those questions, how you engage, and how you work through that. So those are sort of all the big pieces to that.
Great. Thank you.
Sorry.
Don't apologize. We're all family here. It's all very fine. All right. From the Lake Washington School District webpage, every student future ready is the vision of Lake Washington School District. How do trade schools and other career paths fit into this vision? Susan.
Wow, from my experience, if you need a vocational career path, you need to go over to Lake Tech to investigate what they can offer to you. In the 70s, Lake Washington School District separated from Lake Washington Vocational Tech, where Lake Tech would be the vocational part, Lake Washington would be the academic part. We consciously got rid of any kind of vocational coursework. So it doesn't really fit in with the district unless you're going to go over there. And it actually works well, except I think we would do a better job if we provided adequate transportation for those students who don't drive and don't have access to a car. That was one of the biggest impediments for the students that I encountered, and with my own children. I was driving them to school at Lake Tech, and picking them up before they learn to drive. For students who are economically challenged or have parents who can't take them, they're denied the same opportunities that my children were denied simply because I had a car and I could take them. The bus system is awful, but we could use school buses that aren't being used between morning pickup and drop off at the schools in afternoon. That's something that maybe we should really investigate, is providing adequate transportation so that students can take advantage of the vocational program.
Siri?
So every student future ready, how does vocational and technical fit into that? And I would say it is absolutely a key pathway and an opportunity that our students need to be aware of and have access to. Because the other part to that vision is the mission: prepared for college, prepared for the workplace, prepared for personal success. So that falls into all of those. And so the school district's role is we need to be able to increase those opportunities for our students in that way. So the career and college work that's going on, we have some different ones. We have Project Lead the Way that's working. So we have a lot of STEM programs that have been developed at this point in time. Engineering, robotics, and those pieces going forward. Working in partnerships with the technical colleges is probably the most effective way in which to do some of the vocational and technical training, partially because a lot of that, being future ready, a lot of our vocational and technical work involves a great deal of computer work at the same time as it involves a rigor that wasn't necessarily there prior because of the way it works. So how do we make sure that all our students have that? I actually think all students should be exposed to hands-on, applied, different types of work in which to do so. When my son took woodworking in 7th grade, it was probably one of the best things he could have done, because they are applying math and science. And so working to really cross-credit is sort of where they're working at too, to make sure that vocational not only is, it's not just a CTE credit, but you value the applied math that comes through that, or if there's English work that's going through that and a journalism piece that you might be doing. So those are the pieces I think that it's definitely a component of Future Ready. And all students, our goal is that students can choose their pathway, not that their pathway is chosen for them. So that's how we do it, by making sure those opportunities are available, and transportation is absolutely one of the barriers we have in access and that we need to address. So, key component.
Thank you. Any audience questions? All right. My last question that I have, unless anybody has any others: what can the school board do to secure more school bus drivers? And we're going to start with Siri on this one.
Wow, yes, there has been a lot of work in trying to secure more school bus drivers. And so we actually have hired, and we have an individual specifically hired for classified. Bus drivers are a piece of that, so they are directly working to recruit and bring in that sort of thing. They have increased pay. We offer training. We provide the CDL option for them in which to do so. I think the challenge you have for bus drivers right now is, again, it's a split shift sort of concept. You drive in the morning on shifts, and then you have the afternoon, the middle of the day off, and then you drive in the afternoon. There's a set group of people who find that to fit into their schedule as something that works. So I think, again, we're going to have to think differently of how do you define that job. Can you combine that with something else? Is there a way to make that a straight 8 hours if somebody would rather do it that way? So are there ways to change those positions and do it differently? Again, it would all be in partnership with all the players at the table to sort of brainstorm what those options would be. We have increased pay in which to try to be competitive in that side, and it's still a challenge in which to do so. And I think a part of it's just the nature of the job. At the same time, you're also competing against Uber and Lyft and Microsoft and Facebook and Google as we've created these alternative transportation systems. So it's a shrinking pool. So I do think we just have to be proactive in going out and finding people, and then think differently of what that job might entail over time.
Susan?
Bus transportation is something that I studied extensively when my kids were at 3 different elementary schools and trying to figure out how to get bus transportation for them. And one thing that the Lake Washington School District does is when you have a full-size bus that is only dedicated to regular schools, elementary, middle, and high school, when you have a little short bus that's strictly dedicated to special needs transportation. For both of those buses, you have to have a commercial driver's license. Now, we have 95 bus drivers, and many of them are driving 1 or 2 students around in the little short buses. So the solution here is to have the special needs students, as long as they don't need a lift, take those drivers out of the little buses and, actually leave them as commercial bus drivers for the larger buses, but we should be using vans to transport students who have special needs and are only being transported 1 or 2 students at a time. That way we could go from 95 drivers with commercial driver's license who drive the large and small size buses. We could add a significant number of bus drivers who drive simply vans but don't need that special CDL license, and that would expand our transportation options significantly. The other thing is, not every school needs to fill up a bus with 80 students to take them home. The short buses will take 36 to 42 students, so we could coordinate large and small buses to transport more students to more places on more routes. The other problem, of course, is that the split shift is, it's a part-time job, and finding people to do that. Well, we already have 95. We could find more if we used van drivers who didn't need the commercial driver's licenses.
Great. Thank you. Any other audience questions? All right. I'm going to turn the floor back over. If you would like to give a closing statement, you have 3 minutes to give a closing statement. And Susan, we'll start with you.
Being a member of the school board would give me the opportunity to implement many of the ideas that I've thought about over the past 20 years as my children have gone through elementary, middle, and high school, and then the after high school programs such as WANIC, Running Start, and Lake Tech. I would appreciate the opportunity to be on the school board and create policies that actually implement my ideas, and I believe that they would significantly improve the quality of education for all students. I want to also focus on special education. Paraeducators need better training and better hours so that they can work with special education students on a longer term, so that they don't feel like they don't have enough money, so they have to go find other jobs. We don't pay our instructional aides and paraeducators enough, and we don't train them well enough. That is something that I really, really want to focus on, because I believe that it will significantly improve the outcome for all of our special education students, and by focusing on them, it will help the regular classroom teachers who don't need to focus on a full classroom but instead can utilize these aids better. Thank you.
Thank you. Siri?
Well, thank you all for coming out tonight and for your questions. If you have any additional questions, I say we'll be around afterwards, or you can always email or go to my website. You can contact me that way too. So first off, I would just like to say thanks again to Paige and to Madison for being able to put this on and have this opportunity. And what I would say is, I think we all agree that great schools are an integral part of our great communities. And as I've knocked on doors for this campaign and talking to people, I often hear, we moved here for the schools. And on real estate science, I keep seeing the award-winning Lake Washington School District. So people come to our area to be part of Lake Washington because we do provide an excellent public education. And we are student-focused. And I am honored to have been part of creating that legacy and excited to have an opportunity to continue that work. So as I had mentioned before, during my time on the board, where there are challenges in which we've been working to improve, absolutely, we have increased those on-time graduation rates for all our students. We expanded STEM opportunities on hands-on learning and design thinking to give those opportunities to our kids. We have had a focus on educational equity with targeted programmatic efforts, and we made movements to narrow the achievement and opportunity gaps, which has been a lot of work. We have worked to create school environments that enable our students to thrive. And so I would ask that you please vote for me in November. I am an experienced advocate for our students. I am actively engaged at the local, regional, and statewide level. And I'll ensure that Lake Washington continues to be a sought-after district with a strong reputation for a great education. And I will continue to be committed to what I have done in the past, which is excellent outcomes for our students and equitable opportunities for each and every student to reach their potential, inclusive and welcoming learning environments so all our students can thrive, and for strong and effective community partnerships to engage students, businesses, and community in public education, all at the same time ensuring a responsible fiscal management of a very complex system. So I would ask for your vote and support in November, and again, I thank you very much for coming out tonight and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So as you leave this evening, there is actually a brochure pamphlet out there. In the very center spread of that is the statement of each of our candidates this evening, as well as contact information if you are interested in getting more information. I wanted to thank Thomas Bird, who did our AV setup tonight, and I wanted to thank the Redmond Reporter for live streaming this evening. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. We have 2 more candidate forums coming up. One on October 3rd will be for the candidates Angela Burney and Steve Fields, who are running for mayor of Redmond. And on October 17th, Redmond City Council, we have 4 positions open, 1, 3, 5, and 7, and all of those names are listed on here as well. If you do want to see a re-recording of this, you can go, I'm sure, to the Redmond Reporter Facebook page where they'll post that on there, and we will also be posting it on our website and on our Education Hill Facebook page. Thank you all, and have a very good evening, and drive safe.
Thank you.